Hi, this is Marty, and this is another Marketing Masterclass. Today we're going to talk about the presentation that I gave last week to about 40 small to medium-sized business owners at a conference here in Raleigh that was hosted by FedEx. The topic of my talk was how to ask the right questions in e-commerce. I started out by explaining a little bit about who I am, kind of the things I'm most proud of. I'm a cancer survivor and a cancer research fundraiser. We've raised over $60,000 at this point with a lot of help from friends at UNC and Duke. I also rode a bicycle across the United States in the summer of 2010, which is one of those reach exceeding my grasp things. When I got to the Blue Ridge Parkway, I wondered what had I done to myself, but in 60 days we made it to Santa Monica. I'm a former director of e-commerce. For 7 years, I took a site with less than $1 million in revenue, and we turned it into annual revenue of over $6 million, making over $30 million profitably in the 7 years that I was a director of e-commerce. That is completely related to the great teams that I was lucky enough to find and work with. The former marketing director also for Atlantic BT. After I got back from Martin's Ride to Cure Cancer, I spent 2 years working at Atlantic BT to understand the agency side of the business, the B2B content marketing agency side of the business. I left my director of marketing position at Atlantic BT to start Curagami at the end of 2013, when it just felt like there was about to be a new e-commerce, one that seamlessly blends content, social networks, and commerce together, and I wanted to be a part of that. And so with a grant from Triangle Startup Factory, we started Curagami. This presentation came about after a questionnaire in a previous presentation where people were asking how can they compete with Amazon. And I think that's the wrong question to ask in the wrong way. You're not going to compete with Amazon. Amazon is a monster. Trying to compete with them is not as important as trying to learn from them and trying to emulate things that are appropriate for your business, really stating what you're about, who you are, and being very clear about the benefits that you bring to the table. Amazon has scale, and most of the small to medium-sized businesses in the room during this presentation need to find their niche and not be defined so much by Amazon. What's your why? Why are you there? Why do people buy from you? Why do people love you? Tapping into those values is extremely important if you want to have an effective online presence. The other thing that we talked a lot about is knowing your 80-20 rules. 80-20 is a very constant metric, e-commerce. We saw it a lot. We saw it constantly. We saw 20% of our clicks generating 80% of our sales. We saw 20% of our products managing to control 80% of our gross revenue. And so that metric just keeps coming up over and over. And if you know your 80-20 rule, you're in good shape. You know how to merchandise so that your customers are statistically more likely to buy from you, because you're going to make sure they see the 20% of products that generate 80% of your return, your clicks. Another thing we talked about is lowering customer risk. How can you get creative with mobile and apps and the web to lower the risk of buying from you? Reviews are an easy way to lower your customers' risk. Bestsellers and feedback loops like that are another way. I love to talk about changing the world and changing something positive and large and standing for something, and that's why I stole Steve Jobs' term, ding the universe. It's very important to stand out and to stand for something these days. Now, why does Amazon win? Amazon wins because they think in scale. They are big and always looking to get bigger with the least amount of effort possible. They look for velocity, and once they see velocity and movement, they will want to be the king of that movement by lowering price if necessary, or effectively trying to corner the market. This is why the next chart shows the size of the monster that you're up against. Amazon is a colossus. This chart is showing the number of pages indexed in Google, and as you can see, Amazon dwarfs its nearest competitor, which is Apple. Even REI hardly makes a blip on this chart, and REI has several million pages. And so the challenge for most SMBs is to understand this is not an effective strategy. Trying to go head-to-head with Amazon isn't going to work. What you need to understand is your 80-20 rule. What are things that you're doing? What are the things that are 20% of your business that are generating 80% of your revenue. Many people who are smaller find that if they play this strategy, if they get out into the long tail, find terms that they can win and build on those terms, eventually they can work their way into terms that are all the way up here in the red zone, that are much more competitive, but now they've built an effective strategy, a base to then take on that competition. Just in case you didn't think that the 80-20 rule existed all over the place, this next chart shows the number of clicks on the number 1 position in Google down to the number 5 position. And you see significant drop off between number 1 being number 1 and number 2. Not exactly sure what those terms mean anymore because Google's float means that absolute number 1 positions and absolute number 2 positions, you seeing the same thing that I see when we both search for the same term at the same time. All right, that's very rare. Google is the one who makes a decision about who sees what. I use a tool called Mics to look through that Google float and know what position I have just so that I can benchmark and know if we're making progress. But you can see number 1 position, 53% of the clicks. Number 2 position, 15% of the clicks. And so look at this is another, it's called a power distribution or a long tail. There's a lot of clicking going on up in the head, and then when you're down to number 5, very little. And so that's why it's important to find terms that your business can own that have search traffic and build from there. So that's going to end our video notes for the first part of questions to ask in e-commerce, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.